Yo, what's up guys? Welcome to this YouTube series in which I'll explain the ins and outs of being an IGL in Valorant. In this series we'll discuss many different topics regarding just being an IGL and, well, the team environment in general. So, if you're gonna be interested in this series, make sure to drop a like below and hit the subscribe button. And if you have any suggestions or topics that you want me to discuss, make sure to leave them in the comments as well. So, let's get right into the video.
Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to a new video. I recently moved into a new apartment in Cologne where I'll be staying for around the next 6 months or so. And that's kind of why there's a new background behind me. But today we'll discuss strategies. We'll just go over what kind of strategies there are and just how to create these strategies. So to start, what kind of strategies are there? So in my opinion, there are around like 8 different types of strategies you can have. First, you're gonna have defaults. Second, you're gonna have executes. Third, you're gonna have fakes. Fourth, you're gonna have pushes. Fifth, you're gonna have setups. Sixth, you're gonna have full round. Seventh, you're gonna have post plant. And then lastly, as eighth, you're gonna have the retakes. So what strategies you'll use when depends on your calling and your playstyle. So perhaps you'll use more executes than defaults, or maybe the other way around. We'll start by talking about defaults. So a default can be seen as a strategy which you'll use as a base. So it's generally a round in which you try to take space slowly and you try to gain information from your opponents, for example, about like where each player plays and what their routines are. So defaults are used to condition the opponent. For example, you can take hookah with a raise boom bolt in every single default, but once you switch it up and maybe you want to execute A one round, you can still use that boom bolt to trick the opponents into thinking that you're actually playing your default. You'll probably use defaults the most in your games. You can make different types of defaults, for example, one where you sit all the way in the back at the borders, or one where you take aggressive peeks into the sides or certain areas of the map. So an example of a default is, for example, this one on bind, where in this case I just created a quick comp, probably one that I would use. Maybe, I have to think about it better, but Chamber, Raze, KO, Sage, and Astra. This is an example of a default. It's a very standard default that a lot of teams will probably use. Maybe you can switch like this, whatever, this KO up or something, and put him like here on the short stairs, but you can always switch defaults up as well. But this is a very standard default, and you can make, as I said, different kind of defaults where, for example, you're just gonna wait here with two guys just at the borders, and you're just gonna hold. Maybe you expect opponents to make aggressive peeks into whatever your area, or you expect them to push hookah or maybe short. So you can make a default where you're just extremely passive. You make the enemies guess where you are because they have to take the space. Let them waste util. You're just gonna hold for any pushes. So you could call this a passive default. Now another default that you could do is a default that is a bit more active or proactive, is where, for example, you're just going to take hookah. So you're going to focus on certain area or maybe even multiple areas of the map, and you're going to take control of these areas. So for example, in this case, you're just going to boom bolt with Raze, you're going to boom bolt in hookah, it's going to clear his left side, and maybe KO flashes in, you both peek hookah, take hookah, and after that you can kind of decide what you want to do. Maybe you leave one guy there, maybe you leave both, maybe you stay there, and these guys start rotating back towards B, and you do some sort of execute quite quick in the round. But that's all, depending on what the enemies do, depending on what your plan is in the round. And you need to think about this before the round even starts. So this is one example of a default. Obviously, same goes for whatever A side. You can do the same for A side. Maybe you want to kind of take like aggressive peaks, so you take short, maybe you take showers, whatever. That's kind of what a default is. You have a set position for each player, and you try to take control of the map. Most often than not, rather like slowly. Next, you have executes. Executes are strategies which you'll use to get into the site. So you'll pre-plan what kind of util you will use in what place on the site. So you'll also decide what player goes where, and focus on the timing of the pushes so that everyone is tradable or at least pushing together. This is very important because, well, certain pieces of utility, especially flashes or darts are only really effective if you push with them at the right timing. You don't want a piece of utility to disappear before you're pushing on the side. So executes can be done from one choke point or from two or multiple choke points, and the execute will then be called a split if you push from two or multiple choke points. So an example of an execute could be something like this, where you're trying to execute a side of lines, and you basically, when you practice with your team, you're gonna, or when you're designing strategies as the IGL, you're gonna think about what kind of util goes where and where do I want to send what player. So in this case, I just made this up real quick. I'm not sure even if this is good. I didn't think about it. But this is just a very simple and quick execute in which you just pre-plan all the utils. So what you're going to think about is, okay, when am I going to flash as the KO? I'm going to, for example, throw this flash first, and I'm going to throw this flash when these guys are close so they can peek with that flash and clear the close angle right here in the shower corner. And then also with that flash, they can further push on the side. Same goes for smokes. Well, when do I want to smoke? Do I want to probably smoke right before we push, because then the smokes are up as long as possible, and we just, well, it's just the most effective. We just use the smoke as much as possible. And maybe I even want to, if I have another star, obviously, maybe I even want to stun close shower so that this guy is just completely out of the game. He's going to be stunned, he's probably going to be flashed, it's going to be free kill, and that's at least cleared. Then you're also maybe thought about, well, how can I use my Sage in this execute? Well, perhaps maybe you want to use this wall. Because why? Well, this wall just prevents anyone quickly retaking from behind the smoke, maybe with a flash, and it just slows down the retake in general. Just blocks off any defender that's playing backside. Obviously, they can now push from a truck, but you have to worry about one less angle, so that's why the wall is pretty good. If they're going to push a side, they're always going to push from this side. Next, well, you kind of want to decide, obviously, where every player wants to go. So this, as I said, you want to think about this before you even do the execute. For example, I mean, why the race here, why the Sage here? Well, you want to have the race entry, and as you see here, the race is probably going to be like the first guy to enter the site with this flash, then probably the KO, then the Sage, then Astra, and maybe Chamber. So when I think about that, why do I want to put the race showers? Why do I want to put the KO short? Maybe you want to switch it up. As I said, I'm not sure if this is good. But that's kind of how you think about executes, how you design them. Also, maybe a quick note. If you're going to come up with executes on the fly, which is definitely possible, because you're not going to always have like the utility that you need to, well, execute. What you always want to do as the IGL is you want to call what player goes where, and you always want to ask, okay, what kind of utility do we have? And then maybe you want to micromanage so far that you're going to say, okay, well, you're going to go there, you're going to do this, and then you do it for every single person that's alive in the round. It could be everyone, it could be a couple people, and you're going to say what util they're going to use, and probably also when. At least that's what you want to do if you're going to come up with executes on the fly, because as I said, the most important part about the execute is that you're pushing together and pushing with great timing. So you don't want to have this flash right here and then have this race push 1 or 2 seconds later or after it pops, because the flash is only gonna last like 1 more second, maybe 1.5. And then this guy, whoever is playing on site, will just not be as blinded for as long. And then the race is just gonna have a harder time killing that guy, entering the site and whatever. And the same goes for spacing, you know, you always want to stay close. Let's say this KO flashes, and he's running out after the flash to get over Astra. Let's say Astra is right here. Maybe there's a person right in this corner right here. If the Astra is not close, he's not going to get traded, and it's going to be extremely hard to push on the side further, because then these guys got to deal with it. They're going to wrap all the way around here. Maybe there's even a player in lamps. You're just probably going to lose the round. Executes can also turn into fakes, and a fake is when you're doing an execute on one side, but you're trying to cause rotations from the defender side, so you can push the other side. So a fake can also turn into a double fake, where you fake a side, put pressure on the other side, but then still push the initial side. I know this sounds confusing, but basically what you're trying to do is you're pushing one side to make the enemies think, or the opponents think, that you're going towards that side, but actually you're pushing the other side. If successful, it can condition the defender side to just not rotate when you're executing a side, and that's simply weakening their defense and slowing down rotations, meaning that the retake comes in way later and giving you stronger post-plant positions. So here you can also see kind of an example of a fake. Also, what I want to say about executes is you kind of want to keep your executes relatively simple, because more often than not, you're not going to execute when having full utility or right away at start of the round, meaning that you can start creating all these really complicated and intricate executes, which can work really well. And maybe it's really smart to even create those strategies to just use once or maybe twice in a match. But generally speaking, your execute should be simple, so it's easier to execute after defaulting because it doesn't take a lot of utility. And it's easier to condition the enemy because when you're gonna fake and the enemy sees like, okay, well, they're barely using any util, it's probably a fake, then they're not gonna rotate. But if your executes always just use not too much utility, then the opponent's still gonna think like, okay, they're just executing here because they're using the same utility as they are always using. So that's a really important part of executing and conditioning the enemies, especially when you're planning on using fakes. So right here, this might already be kind of too much. You can probably delete a flash right here. But something like this is very realistic. Astra having 3 stars is very possible to have in the mid round. So maybe you want to even just remove this one, but it kind of depends. So it's going to look something like this, is where you're just going to use your 2 smokes, going to use a flash, going to use the KO knife, and you're just going to push a side with maybe 3 guys. And what you want to do is you just want to sell the fake, right? So you're staking the execute. Maybe these guys are going to even push on the side, raise maybe double satchels. If he has a nade, he can nade close showers. KO is going to flash, going to throw his knife. Astra from here, from B hookah, is going to throw 2 smokes, because that's why Astra is good. She can throw smokes everywhere. It's going to sell the fake that way. And then what KO can try to do is he's going to push on side as well. Maybe fight or make noise towards lamps. And then what he can do after that is he could even take the TP and go towards B after he faked successfully. And what you can see obviously here is that Chamber is already walking up long. So this means that in this fake you probably already took B long control, or Chamber just took B long control, he's like sneaking up. And you also probably already took hookah control, because you don't really want to start or having to clear this when pushing B, because if just 1 or 2 guys are in hookah, you're probably going to be dead and lose the round. So the fake here is you're just going to push A side. There are maybe 2, maybe 3 players waiting on the other side to get ready to push after you faked it, so they make a lot of noise. After they make noise, they're just going to go back, maybe leave 1 guy here to lurk. And these guys start pushing with some simple util. Maybe Astra still has a star. She can, I don't know, smoke off elbow. Maybe KO has another flash, has a molly, can molly like backside. Maybe he has his knife back somehow. Probably not. Maybe he has another flash, and you could just kind of make do with what you got. Maybe you just push out dry because you don't have anything, or you don't want to use anything. Maybe you even just contact, which is also a good option. Contact meaning you just shift in and you basically only push when you make contact with the enemies. And sometimes even then you just keep shifting. That's another topic that I'm not going to discuss right here. It's a bit too advanced, maybe. It isn't, but too much information. Moving on, we'll discuss pushes. So a push is a strategy in which you'll try to take control of a specific area of the map by pushing it. So on the attacker side, this could be, for example, garage on Haven, and for CT side, this could be taking control of 1 or both of the mains. So pushes are similar to executes in a way that you're pre-planning what utility you will use at what time and in what place. So the main difference between an execute and a push is that instead of taking the side, you're taking a specific area of the map, generally with less players and less utility. So after taking control, you either maybe got a pick, or you can just leave 1 person in the area to get information, like for example jiggling, or taking a deep angle or pushing. And obviously you can also just leave it completely and make the enemy think that you have control of the area, while in reality you actually don't have control and you might just be pushing the other side of the map. So an example of a push is something like this, where it's really simple, by the way, but you kind of want to, once again, pre-plan how you're going to take an area. And something really simple is maybe something like this. So maybe you're defaulting, you took mid control, you have full mid control, you want to take garage. Well, Astra is going to smoke window, Ray's is going to boom bolt, so you know that, so you have info that, for example, no one is playing like C short, maybe someone even clears close somewhere, it doesn't matter. You can use a boom bolt to clear whatever, and then Breach is going to use a flash, so you can push in towards garage. And this is a really simple example, but you can also switch it up. Maybe you want to make multiple takes because, well, the enemies might adapt to what you're doing, so you got to watch out for that as well. So perhaps maybe the enemy is going to play right here in this dirty ass corner. Maybe instead of using a flash, you're just going to use like a stun to stun him right there. And maybe just in general you want to use a stun instead of a flash. Maybe you want to stun C short because he always plays there. Maybe you want to stun this close corner right here. Maybe you want to use an aftershock. Maybe you want to even use your erase nades. So those are all things that you need to think about also while in the game to adapt to your opponents. Generally speaking, you want to discuss before, even if it's just simple things like this, you want to discuss, okay, how are we going to take garage so we're always on the same page, we know when to push, and we know what util we're going to use, and therefore we also know what util we're going to have left in the round. One thing that you might also want to think about, same goes with executes, same goes with fakes, same goes with defaults. There are two different types of abilities in this game. Maybe three, but generally speaking, you have one that is rechargeable by seconds, one that's rechargeable by, I guess, getting kills, and then the other one is just an ability that you can use, but you'll never be able to get it back into the round. So generally speaking, when defaulting, you want to use abilities that you can get back by just waiting, you know, so that is rechargeable by seconds, by time. So for example, breach stun. So maybe you want to save the flash for the execute and just use a breach stun, then wait 40 seconds, and then split C with the stun, 2 flashes, and an aftershock. So you have full util. So you didn't waste any flashes that you might have been able to use on the execute. That's a really important thing to keep in mind. Another example of a push is from the CT side or defender side. So this is an example when you maybe want to push C. So what you simply do is you go over how you want to take C long control. So maybe you want to use like an Astra smoke to smoke deep to cut off any people holding C long from like a deep angle. And then you, for example, want to use a KO pop flash which pops around the corner for the race to push. You can even modify this by maybe letting or allowing the race to use a satchel or double satchel to go even faster. And you can classify this also as a push. And once again, it's really simple, but you need to discuss these things to understand what everyone is doing, to understand the correct timing of the push. Now we'll talk about setups. So setups are strategies in which the position of the player or players is predetermined and they're trying to hold a certain area of the map together. For example, 2 players are holding a certain crossfire together on the side, or a breach is holding a flash and flashes on the contact of the second player, or piece of utility, like a turret, trip, or maybe even a cam. So setups can be used after taking control of a certain area, or for the defender side, right at the start of the round. So an example of a setup could be something like this that you see here. So the setup here is that the breach is holding a flash here from A-Link. The chamber places this trip so that the opponent can actually see the trip when they go kind of deep in mid, but they don't have to go all the way in the corner, which allows Raze to kind of hide in this corner, get kind of close to the entrance. Once this guy, that's probably going to be standing like right here, could probably even do something like this, whatever, Brimstone, you're going to be the victim right here. Let's say this Brimstone walks up here on mid, he's going to try to break the trip on B, he's going to walk here, he's going to see the trip, but see no one else, he's going to break the trip, and right as he breaks the trip, Breach is gonna flash, Raze is gonna peek, kill this guy, get out, and you have the man advantage. So this is what I call a setup, but a setup can even be simpler than this. You can just delete all this utility. A setup can even be as simple as this, where you're just holding a crossfire, and maybe you give the setup a name so you can easily call it in the round, but even this is a setup and it's just a simple crossfire. Maybe you make different setups for every site and you come up with bait and switches, which basically means like, okay, let's say this guy plays here, he's holding like the garage push, he's waiting for them to push into the garage, and only when he takes contact, this guy's gonna peek out. So they're not holding the same angle together. No, this guy's only gonna peek on contact of this player. And you can obviously replace Astra by maybe a piece of utility, maybe put a trip in towards garage. But that's called a bait and switch for you guys that wants to know that. And these, I would all call these things setups, because they're like special things that you probably planned before or you're planning in a round. Like, yo, let's hold this, I'll peek on your contact, that's also a setup. But generally speaking, you want to pre-plan most of these things, and so that you can easily call them in the round and people know exactly what you're doing, and you also know what you need to do. You also have full round strategies. These strategies include an entire description of what every player will do in the round. This means that every player knows exactly what to do in the round, and he doesn't have to take initiative as the entire round is already planned out. This is often used for more complicated strategies when it's harder to coordinate everyone at the same time. For example, when using double or triple fakes. So an example of a full round strategy could look something like this. I would even say that this obviously, when you see this, is actually quite complicated, and you're probably thinking like, okay, what the fuck is on the board right now? But this might even be possible just by playing a default and just calling this in the game. But something like this could even be really good if it works, if you know it's a pretty good strategy. It might be worth it to just write it down and make sure that everyone knows exactly what to do, because obviously this is going to be hard to coordinate, I'll say that much. So the planning here is for, let's just say, like the normal default for me would be like, whatever, Breach and Raze go towards like mid, Astra just hold C long, Chamber and KO will try to put pressure on A. So the thing right here is, you just do your normal default. But Chamber is going to put a chip, or they're going to take long control together. KO is going to just knife here for at the start, just for some info, make sure they are not pushing short or peeking short. And they're going to take long control together. After that, Chamber just puts his trademark right here. And then he goes towards short, he's going to clear shorts together with KO. And they're going to just make sure that this whole area right here is clear, so Chamber can kind of hold this without having to worry for a long push, because he's put his chip right there. Then after they have short and long, kind of, or well, kind of short and long, you can even put this maybe somewhere here, but doesn't matter. KO is just going to rotate off, he's going to maybe go towards window or second mid, and these guys here on mid, they're going to get ready to push towards B. So what they're going to do is they're going to throw a B fake. While Chamber is still here holding short, and Astra is still here holding C long, and KO is in window. So what can happen is that KO is going to try to flash them on B from window. Astra is going to throw two smokes right here. And what they're going to do is they might satchel on top of side. Breach could flash like backside. Like Raze could double satchel on top of side, flash backside, clear it. And after they fake this, at least Breach is going to go back together with the KO, probably Raze as well. These guys are going to go back in towards garage. Breach is going to use a flash to flash into garage. If Astra has a smoke, she's going to smoke into garage window. They push garage together. Whatever, you can use your util that's left. Maybe you have an aftershock, you want to aftershock this. Maybe you want to aftershock that. All depends on whatever the fuck you feel like. And then kind of the split comes in, you know. So you faked B, going into a C split, pushing garage with three guys. You've got Astra here on long. Maybe she wants to suck backside here, 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 here. Maybe even CT, so no one can just rush out CT quickly. All depends on whatever you want to do. And this is kind of like a full round strategy. So from the start, everyone knows what to do. You even have the Chamber here on the lurk as well. So when you're splitting C, they're probably all going to rotate from A. And Chamber can just slowly lurk out A and flank them. So this is a great example of a full round strategy. Obviously, as I said, there are a lot of steps into this. This is actually quite a complicated strategy. Maybe not the most complicated, but it's definitely complicated enough for you to maybe want to write this down and make sure you specify for every single player what they're going to need to do. And maybe you want to, in practice, dry run this. When the spike is planted, you'll be in a situation that is called post-plant. So for the post-plant, there are multiple things you can do. Generally, you'll plan an ideal position for your teammates after planting a spike. So you can do this for a scenario in which you have 5, 4, or 3 players. You can prioritize certain spots that are really strong in a post plant, so people will know what spots to take, even though you might not have all 5 players alive. Besides deciding what positions are best to play, you can even design certain plays on which you'll let one player alert really late, or you can design a push towards the defenders, or you could even design a full lineup post plant. An example of a post plant could be something like this. So let's say you executed a site, you're successful, you got 5 players, and you already discussed with your team in practice, okay, well, what are the best post plant spots? So maybe you're gonna think about, okay, well, if I have 5 people, where do I want it to be? So in this case, I'm not saying that this is the best thing. I think it's pretty good, but I just made this real quick. But you have to think about it yourself. Maybe watch some pro teams, see how they do it, and then determine yourself what positions you think are best. So in this case, when you have 5 players alive, you discussed, okay, well, when we plant a spike, maybe you even want to do different type of post plants for different types of plants. Let's say you're just going to plant here, and once we planted a spike, we want 2 players under heaven, 1 player here in graffiti, 1 player default, and then maybe 1 player long, or maybe even short. Depends, I guess. And maybe you even want to go as far as, well, if we have 5 players alive, I want to have these characters playing on these positions. So maybe you actually want to have the race here on default, and maybe the KO here, so you can flash. Maybe you want to have the breach here instead of the KO, because whatever, his flashes are a bit better, because he can flash through the wall, and maybe KO can get close here and then flash towards T. All depends. Maybe you want to have Astra stay alive, have Chamber here with a TP, because Astra can maybe, well, place down the suck on the spike and delay the diffuse. Those are all things you need to think about. And what you're going to do is you're going to slowly determine, okay, well, what positions are most important for me? So let's say I have 4 people alive. Let's say somehow, I don't know, let's just say Race entries, he died. We got the trade. It's 4v4. Well, what do we want to do? What positions do we want to prioritize? Do we still want to just keep 2 players under heaven, 1 graffiti and 1 long? Or do we maybe want to switch it up a little and just keep 1 guy under heaven and still play with 1 default, 1 graffiti? So that's something you're going to think about. Maybe you even want to switch it up, have no 1 graffiti, have 2 under heaven, 1 default, and then kind of think about that. You can go 1 step further. Maybe think, okay, well, let's say we actually decide, we got there, he played with 2 defenders, we got 2 trades. Let's say Bridge died as well. Well, how do we want to play? Do we even want to play with a long player at this point? Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe it's better if you, once again, have like a setup like this, and this is how you prioritize like spots. So let's say you identified these 3 spots as the most important ones, then you want to make sure that in any situations you're at least going to have people in these spots. And that's how you kind of create a post plant. Now, once again, if you want to get a bit more advanced with your post plant play, maybe you can think about, well, how to kind of switch up my post plant, how to put more pressure on the enemies, how to maybe take a little bit more risk. And you can do that by, for example, maybe you plant a spike, you got 1, 2 entries, you know the defenders are rotating in, maybe you want to get close to like 2, 3 guys even. You have like Breach on default right here, it's going to get ready to flash here. Oh, that's an aftershock apparently. It's going to get ready to flash here, or maybe it's the KO, maybe even both, which is not too bad, by the way. Concept of double flashing, which I also want to explain that. So like Breach is going to flash, maybe KO is going to flash again, and then these guys all push together, and maybe you can get like 2, 3 kills. It's a 2v2, it's a maybe 3v2 for you. Chamber TPs away maybe, and then you kind of have like these people still alive, and then they only have 2 players. Let's say you get 3 kills in total. and then you're probably going to win the round. So those are things which you can think about. Maybe you want to make it super simple, and you just say like, okay, well, we got the site. We always make sure that chamber or whatever, maybe it's an Astra, that's holding behind, because we don't want to, maybe still as a piece of utility. So we want to make sure the Astra stays alive. And then we always let her be on either on long or short. So we plant the spike. This guy already starts lurking back towards B, and just slowly tries to flank. And obviously, when you're playing with a lurker in a post plant, it's really important to try to stay alive as long as possible. So don't go in peeking or saying like, okay, 3, 2, 1, let's peek CT together. That's good if it's maybe a normal post plant, but generally speaking, if you play with a lurker, you just want to play a bit more passive, a bit more reserved, let them push on the side, try to delay as much as possible, maybe jiggle a little bit, shoot back, make sure they just can't push out as easily. Finally, you also have retakes. Retakes are strategies in which you're pushing the side as a defender after the attackers planted the spike or took the site. Retakes will often be done on the fly, but sometimes you might decide to play retake on a side by just leaving one person there and stacking towards the other sides. Then it might be a good idea to have a plan on how to retake the site, and in this case you can take the approach of an execute, because you basically can just pre-plan what everyone will do when and where everyone will go. You can design multiple retakes by using utility in different spots, pushing from different places, or only just one place, or even playing with one or multiple players pushing from behind. Retakes can also be done fast, meaning that right after the attackers planted the spikes, or even just took the site, you'll just instantly start your retake. So a retake could look maybe something like this. Now, as you can see, this resembles a lot of an execute, like the util being used, these 2 smokes, having 2 flashes, the molly, the aftershock, you know. So it's basically literally an execute, but then for defenders to, well, also get the site. So in this case, this is just a retake, which could be used, in which we're going to use 2 smokes to block off like any choke points, so you don't want to have like an op or whatever holding here. So you want to block off any people holding from short and towards the side. And you basically, what you're trying to do in the retake, you're trying to make sure you isolate the fights and you try to get a max of 2 people to fight. That's why you want to block these choke points off. Obviously, sometimes these smokes could even help the enemy. Why? Well, if your flashes are not good, or even if your flashes are good, they can hide in the smoke, quickly pop out, kill one, get back into the smoke, and maybe stay alive. So you gotta watch out with that. Maybe you want to decide, okay, maybe this round we do use smokes, maybe next round we don't, because they might adapt to that. And that's a really important part about retakes, is that you always want to be able to adapt when retaking. So you always also want to be switching it up, because otherwise people are going to get used to your retakes. They're going to read what you're going to do. They're going to know the weaknesses, and that's obviously not good. So you want to switch it up sometimes. So for example, here you can just decide like, okay, well, we put these 3 players very close together. They're going to go from CT. KO is gonna molly here. They're gonna push out with a flash. Maybe Breach gonna aftershock default. After aftershock default, KO is just gonna flash high behind these players, so they can just get into the side. Maybe if he has another flash, he can flash here again, so that anyone pushing out of the smoke will get blinded again. You can even determine pathing, like entry paths, before you, you know, when you design a retake. So you're gonna think about, okay, well, how do I want my players to enter the site? Same goes for executes, by the way. I actually forgot to talk about that, but you can always just, like, in a program like this, for example, you can just, you know, draw like, okay, Race is gonna go this way, maybe Chamber is gonna be the guy clearing default, and then Breach is gonna go with Race in order to trade in. So you can think about that, and think about how you want your players to move when entering the site. So this is probably a very long video, so thank you for all your attention. I know this is a lot of information, and I probably wasn't even able to explain everything that I wanted to explain, but at least we discussed what defaults, executes, fakes, pushes, setups, full rounds, post plans, and retakes are, and how to create each of these strategies. So the next step will be to create protocols for each of these strategies, which we'll discuss in the next video.
thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or found it interesting, make sure to drop a like below and hit the subscribe button. If you have any suggestions or topics that you want me to discuss, make sure to drop them in the comments as well. And I would love you guys. Thank you so much for fucking watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you in next videos. Alright, peace out.